and good evening, everybody. I am welcome to this week's Salon webinar, our space to talk about research careers, the ups, the downs, and the real stuff in between. I'm Adam Smith. I'm the Program Director for Dementia Researcher, and today we're tackling a topic that many of us will know way too well. It's imposter syndrome. You've done the work, you've earned the place, and still that voice creeps in. Do I really belong here? Am I good enough? Was that success or was it just luck? Some of the things that I'm sure have run through your mind and still do through mine every week. In research, where we constantly test ourselves and face rejection and compare our work to others, it's easy for self-doubt to take over. Even when there's no good reason for it. So today's session is all about naming that voice and understanding where it comes from. And more importantly, learning how to push back against it. We're joined by two of my favorite people who are both here, who are going to turn their cameras on now, unprompted. We're joined by the brilliant dementia researcher, regular contributors and bloggers who I think have talked to, so I think certainly Rebecca, I think, has written a blog on this topic in the past as well. And they're both going to challenge those inner critics. We have Rebecca Williams, who's a PhD student at the University of Cambridge. After an undergrad and master's at Oxford, she moved to Cambridge for her doctorate, settings where imposter syndrome thrives for many. I feel sure. She now spends her days collecting data, coding, and supporting young people to explore science careers. Alongside Rebecca, we have the brilliant Dr. Connor Richardson, who's welcome back to the salon again, and Rebecca as well, not your first time here. And Connor is a Alzheimer's Society NIHR DEMCOM fellow at the Newcastle University, working at the intersection of epidemiology, AI, and dementia research. He's transitioned from cancer pharmacology to aging to neuropathology and has insights in how imposter feelings show up at every career stage. Together, they're going to share their reflections for 10 minutes. Those who know how the salon works, our two speakers take it in turns. They're going to talk for 10 minutes. Then we're going to have a chat. And particularly on this topic, sorry, it's a floating piece of dust. Particularly on this topic, we'd love for you to get involved as well. So we'd love for you to share your own experiences, your own top tips for how you deal this. So please do chat away message away in the chat, and if you have any questions for Connor and Rebecca, you can share those using the Q&A function below. And if you're watching this on recorded, don't worry, you can reach out to both Rebecca, Connor, or myself through the Dementia Research Community app using the message service at the top, and we'll always be happy to take questions after the day. Rebecca is going to go first, and Rebecca has Hi, Rebecca. Thank you very much. Have I dragged you away from rehearsals? You've had so many.
No, I'm showless at the minute. I don't know how I'm coping quite. Yeah, I did my last show at the beginning of April, so auditions for the Railway Children are next. So fingers crossed, this youthful face can get cast as a railway child.
And you get it. I was going to say, are you youthful enough you can still go for one of the children in that?
I was cast as a 15-year-old last year, so apparently I can play 10 years younger than myself and no one bats an eye.
I wish I had that same benefit. Right, over to you. Thank you very much.
Fab. So yeah, as Adam said, my name's Rebecca or Becca or Becky or any variation thereupon. I'm a final year PhD student at the University of Cambridge, and I'm really excited to talk to you a little bit today about something that really does plague us all. When I brought this up to my supervisor way back in like my first year of my PhD, he said, you know, honestly, I'd be more worried if you didn't have imposter syndrome, because we all have it, including himself, you know, everyone at all levels of the academic spectrum. So I thought we'd kick off with a definition. Why not start classic? So imposter syndrome is often defined as this feeling of being incompetent despite evidence of competence. It is dynamic. It is a spectrum. I think for me, certainly, it fluctuates from day to day, how much I feel this kind of imposter syndrome versus how much sometimes I actually do start to think I know what I'm doing, very rarely, but it does happen. And it's also something that's quite difficult to study. But in a study by Gottlieb in 2020, they estimated that 22 to 60% of final year medical students had imposter syndrome. So as I say, it's certainly not uncommon, ranging from a significant minority to actually a majority of people in these kind of academic spheres that experience it. It's associated with increased levels of stress. I probably don't need to tell you that. And particularly, I found this interesting. It's hypothesized that it's a mediator between perfectionism and stress. So perfectionism in isolation might not necessarily be a bad thing, but paired with imposter syndrome, that's where it creates this stress, and obviously linked to other mental health concerns as well, like anxiety, depression, because of those feelings of not feeling like we fit in, like we belong. I think it's also interesting that it seems to mostly affect high achieving individuals, which is great because it means that if you have imposter syndrome, you're probably high achieving anyway. Brilliant circular logic there. It might, of course, just be that it's more studied in these populations, but it also seems to be more common in women and in ethnic minorities. And as a woman and someone with, we were just talking about this, with a northern accent that you don't hear a lot in academia, I think that might just be because it often feels like these spaces aren't designed by or for us. And so I think it's much easier to feel like you're standing out from the crowd and you don't quite fit in, that maybe you think about things or you approach things in a slightly different and unique way. And while that can absolutely be a strength, I think it's also easy to feel like you're the odd one out a little bit. So it's also not new. So this is a study from 1978, which was looking at imposter syndrome in high achieving women. And this is a quote from one of them. Obviously, I'm in this position because my abilities have been overestimated. Very classic bit of imposter syndrome. And I was curious what exactly position she was talking about here. And it's department head. She was the chair of an entire department, still felt this way. And this is one not from that study, but from an interview with a famous woman of, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out. But who said that? Maya Angelou. And if she had imposter syndrome, look, we all can have it. So I find looking at quotes like this quite helpful because it humanizes imposter syndrome a little bit to me. It reminds me that it really is something that other people have. And it's the same thought patterns that I can identify within myself. But I also find quotes like this sometimes are a double-edged sword. And the reason is that if you're anything like me, and I've had other people come up to me and use this same approach, it can make you feel like you don't have imposter syndrome. And that's because if you start off with this feeling that, okay, I'm incompetent, I've been overestimated, I don't belong here, classic imposter syndrome thoughts, right? And then you find out for the first time that imposter syndrome is a thing. And you're like, oh, maybe I'm not an imposter. Maybe I'm not incompetent. Maybe I have imposter syndrome. Maybe this is something that applies to me. But then you look at the definition for imposter syndrome, which is feelings of incompetence despite evidence of competence. And precisely because you have imposter syndrome, you do not think you're very competent. And so imposter syndrome can only apply to people if you're actually competent. And so you end up right back at the beginning going, no, I'm incompetent. And I've had people come up to me really convinced about this, that they do not have imposter syndrome. They are the genuine imposter. In a sea of people with imposter syndrome, they understand it exists. And I've done this myself. You understand it exists. You understand everyone else probably does have imposter syndrome because you can identify the evidence that they are competent. But you feel like the one genuine imposter in this sea of people with imposter syndrome. So you don't want to use the label. So for me, dealing with imposter syndrome, step one is recognizing that you do have it. You sat there right now, despite any perceived evidence to the contrary, you do have imposter syndrome if you feel like you are an imposter. You are not the special being who is the genuine imposter in a sea of people with imposter syndrome. As someone who does have anxious thoughts, I completely understand this thing that completely irrational thoughts can sometimes masquerade with an incredible level of rationality. But I'm here to tell you now, don't believe it. Do not believe your brain. If you think I'm explicitly talking to everyone but you, that is incorrect. You sat there. If you feel like an imposter, you do have imposter syndrome. So take that label and run with it. To me, the second part of dealing with imposter syndrome, once you've recognized that it is something that you have, if you feel like you're an imposter, is recognizing how it will affect you and affect your work. So as I said, we know that people with imposter syndrome can suffer with other kind of mental health concerns. But also for me, it's just recognizing that sometimes it can bring out other emotions such as jealousy. And that's because when I'm feeling incompetent in myself, seeing other people doing well feels like a bit of a personal attack. So I think recognizing how it can affect interpersonal relationships has been really important for me, and fighting back on that front. As we say, it's also linked to perfectionism, and so you can lead into this spiral of perfectionism and procrastination, right? Nothing will ever be perfect enough, and therefore you procrastinate doing things, and that can affect your productivity. It can also affect your learning, your ability to take in new information, and all of this together can obviously lead to things like burnout. Now, the reason that I say this isn't to scare you. It's because I think sometimes we like to think that we work in a vacuum, and that the person that we are 9 to 5 is just an independent being who is there to do things, and nothing outside of work should impact that. But the truth is that it does. And so if you have imposter syndrome and you're experiencing any of these things on screen as a result of that imposter syndrome, it might affect your work. That is not because you are incompetent. That is not further evidence towards your incompetence, or that you've been overestimated, or that you don't belong to be here. That is just the fact that you're human. We all deal, with our personal gremlins, and I think recognizing that that will have an impact on your work has been important for me in dealing with imposter syndrome, and remembering to be kind to myself. The other thing that I have kind of in dealing with imposter syndrome that helps with all of that side of things is talking to other people about it. I think it's really easy when we have something that we perceive as kind of a personal defect or something like this, that you want to push it down. You don't want to talk to people about it because you're worried that everyone else will start to see you differently, and they'll realize also, oh yeah, no, actually, no, you're right. You don't belong to be here. That is not going to happen. And so I actually think it's a great kind of exposure therapy, and you start to realize we're all in the same boat, and that everyone feels they have imposter syndrome, and therefore either all of us are right and none of us deserve to be here, or it is actually the case that we're all doing just fine. Now, all of that so far has been from quite a well-being perspective, and that's really important to me because, as I say, well-being and work tie in together quite closely. I've got an internship coming up at the Department of Work and Pensions, so I can say that with some level of authority now. But there's also the pragmatics of dealing with imposter syndrome in the work. How do you just get by day to day? And here I think there is a good level of fake it till you make it. Someone once said to me, and I can't remember who it is, and it guts me because it's done so much for me. Don't talk yourself out of rooms you deserve to be in. Because let's say for a crazy moment that you're right. Let's say that you have tricked everyone to get here, that you don't actually deserve to be here, but you've managed to fly under the radar. That's not a reason for crippling self-doubt. That's a reason for an evil maniacal laugh at the top of a hill, right? You've done it. Well done. Keep it up. No one will find you ever, right? He's there, by the way, just in case you're wondering. No one needs to know. Apparently, some people have made whole careers while feeling like they don't deserve to be here. They've made entire careers while being incompetent, and that could be you. So I think whether it's a little bit of humor, whether it's talking to other people, there are ways to deal with this head on and recognize that imposter syndrome does not have to manifest as you getting less opportunities. And in fact, it's often really good to kind of call it as it is and say, right, if I've really tricked everyone into being here, then I'm already pretty smart because I've tricked some pretty clever people to get where I am. So make the most of it. Keep tricking people. See how far you can get while being incompetent. Apparently, you're not. So just to round off, my 3 things that I think are good for dealing with imposter syndrome. 1, recognize you do in fact have it. Ignore all of the wonderful cognitive gymnastics your brain is capable of. If you feel like an imposter, you've got imposter syndrome. The second one is recognizing the impact it will have on you personally, remembering to be kind to yourself, and that if you do see any impact on your work, that is a human thing to happen and is not evidence in favor of the fact that you are not competent. And 3 is to face it head on, whether that be talking to other people about it, which again can take a bit of courage, but talking to other people about it, I think a healthy work environment is really good for that. Be that using a sense of humor, or be that just absolutely powering through and faking it till you make it. And who knows, one day you might actually start to believe all the hype that people say about you. So with that, I'm very happy to take any questions. I'm on X and Blue Sky, and I'm going to do a cheeky plug that I'm also now on YouTube over at Back in the Brain, where I talk a bit about neuroscience, both as the neuroscience and also the life and the scientist behind it. So if there's any topics that you'd like to see on there, as well as Dementia Researcher, or my lovely Dementia Researcher blogs, that's a new avenue I'm trying out. So with that, I'll go back to you, Adam, and stop sharing my slides.
To Rebecca's YouTube channel, I've watched your films you've put out there so far. Very good.
Oh, no.
Oh, they're great. You're feeling, don't say oh no, it's great. How do you notice, when, like, the signs of being an imposter? Certainly I know things like turning down opportunities to speak and stuff when you think, oh no. I shouldn't be the one to talk to that. It should be my boss,
Yeah.
or it should be, you should get somebody else. They'll be better than me, even though they invited you. Have you? I mean, how has that manifested itself in your career
Yeah,
so far?
absolutely. I went to a conference a couple of years ago, and one of the keynote speakers got up and they gave her this fantastic introduction. She basically revolutionized this particular field. She was a massive name. And so they gave her this glowing introduction. She got up and the first thing she said was, "All I did really was write a paper." And that really stuck with me of like, even it really say at all levels, I think it, so to some extent it fades, but it probably never goes away. For me, it is a conscious effort that anytime I start to feel like I shouldn't do something because it scares me, I make more of an effort to do it. I think for me, I'm just a very stubborn person. So if there are things that make me anxious, I do them straight away. And that goes for kind of work. It also goes for kind of speaking opportunities. I actively, in some cases, try and seek out the things that scare me in an attempt to kind of dampen down that voice. Because oftentimes I've never had something go disastrously wrong, right? And so it's a kind of, like I say, it's kind of exposure therapy. I, as a kid, was terrified of Christmas crackers because of the loud snap they made. And so me and my mum at one point pulled like 100 Christmas crackers in our conservatory to kind of expose away that fear. And to me, like I say, I'm a very stubborn person, so that's how I've got around that. Because I think, like I say, I think it absolutely does happen of turning down these opportunities. I've just had to like consciously practice saying yes to things, especially when they scare me.
Yeah, I think it's the, yeah. I mean, that manifests itself, doesn't it, in that not taking opportunities when they come along, or not asking questions because you think, oh god, that's going to be a dumb question at
Yeah,
conferences. What else have I seen commonly come up? It's kind of, because it also then comes across as modesty, doesn't it? It's kind of like, oh, when you write papers, it's always we, or it's not me. It's kind of partly as well about being able to take credit when you have
yeah,
done
and
something.
I was just having a talk today with the wonderful Martina Bacchetta, who was partnered with me through the AR UK mentorship scheme a while back about kind of applying to fellowships and postdoctoral opportunities as I come to the end of my PhD. And she gave this fantastic advice that, especially in fellowships, it's about your idea and it's about you, and it's okay to say, this is about me, and what I want to do, and especially as you're kind of gaining independence as a researcher. So yeah, that's definitely going to still be something I'm going to have to practice as I kind of move along to be more independent in kind of postdoctoral positions than I have been in the PhD.
And everything you'll read on this topic as well does talk to this being a career long thing. Don't assume that
Mm-hmm.
once you become like a leading expert, as you mentioned in your talk, that this will go away. That even the most senior researchers kind of still talk to this being a problem in their lives. You had some great advice there. Now let's hear from Connor, who's also gonna talk to us.
Hello.
Switch my view back. There we go. Oh, turn back to gallery. There we go. Thank you very much, Connor. Over to you.
Well, thank you. That was amazing, Rebecca. Well done. That was like genuinely amazing to follow. I'm definitely more scared now. But so in the spirit of what Rebecca was talking about, I also challenged myself to not give these talks with slides. So I've been in a very long public engagement thing today, so I'm sorry if I do meander around the topic, but I'm very talked out. But yes, I'm really excited to talk about imposter syndrome because, as it was touched on earlier, I think almost every single person I've spoke to in my career in education has had some degree of imposter syndrome. So I think there's no fluke that we're talking about that in the career that we are. And in fact, I've only ever met one person in my entire career who was a professor at the time, who will remain nameless, who one of the PhD students in the audience of a talk once asked them about imposter syndrome and how they dealt with it in their career, and their response was, "I don't understand what imposter syndrome is. Just be confident." And Yeah, so considering that's the only time I've ever heard that voice, I'd definitely err on the side of it being more prevalent than not. And I think based on kind of my experience of it and talking to my peers about it, I think the saddest part for me is that feeling of like not belonging, like we don't belong in the space that we are. I find that actually as I've grown as a researcher and the longer I've been there, I find that quite sad. I think often like seeing it in like younger researchers now, if I'm supervising PhD students, it's I don't know, it tugs at the heartstrings a bit. And I feel kind of that we let people down by letting them feel this way. And I think often the question is never, will we experience it? It's always, at what point will we experience it? To what degree will we experience it? And, how can we navigate it the best we can? And I agree with a lot of what Rebecca said there. I think some things I'll come at a slightly different perspective on is that I think sometimes it can be I think sometimes it's unhelpful to think of imposter syndrome as sometimes it's unhelpful to think of it as a syndrome, because I think sometimes it makes it feel like there's something wrong with you. Like, why are you feeling this way? Your confidence is something that you need to improve on, which a lot of the time I think, all of us can improve on our confidence, and that's not a bad thing. But I think sometimes we do need to recognize that a lot of the times the academic institutions and the environments that we work in aren't exactly the best of places, and can often intensify those feelings. So just a little bit about my personal journey with imposter syndrome. When I really look back at it, I don't think there's ever been a time in my education or my career where I haven't felt it to some degree. Even if I go way back into like middle school, high school, every time I passed a test, I think I've always been an element of like, that one was a fluke. I always remember feeling incredibly lucky that I got into a good university when I was 18. Convinced that all my friends got there on merit and I'd just scraped by and slipped through the net. And that really just carried with me. And in my own personal experience, I think there's definitely a class element to a lot of imposter syndrome. And that's not to say that a lot of people from whatever background you're from, however privileged, you can't feel it. And, those aren't valid feelings. But I think from my experience, there's definitely an element of class to it, especially in the more kind of elite universities. Just a slight story from my perspective is the first time when I was in high school, our Bunsen burners were banned because they were often too dangerous to be trusted to the class of my high school. And the first time I walked into a lab in a biochemistry practical when I got to university, and a few people on my bench just I watched them kind of knowing their way around equipment and everything. And I just thought, oh my God, I'm just never going to catch up. But of course that's not true. And there's nothing wrong with you, and everyone's feeling scared, and you do catch up, and you get used to your environment. But I do think, especially in talks within researchers, I think sometimes we need to be really honest about what it is about academia that can really intensify these feelings, because I do think although imposter syndrome is prevalent in whatever profession you're in, especially if you're in a sort of particularly high achieving profession like the law or medicine or anything like that, I think there are sort of certain aspects to academia which have its own challenges. So one thing I've always personally struggled with is I think it's really, really hard to pin down what an academic career is. What is a successful academic? And I think working on your confidence is one thing, but I think one of the things we struggle with in academia is not having kind of clear benchmarks to kind of measure your success to, which I think a lot of the time we're comparing each other, but academia is often not it's a greasy pole, but it's often not one going straight up and down in a linear way. And when you speak to different academics, often they've taken time out of academia, they've gone into industry, they've gone into teaching, they've switched disciplines. You know, it's a greasy pole, but it can be one that twists and turns and splits apart and loops into completely other structures and comes back to being whatever it was. And there are a lot of different routes to being a successful academic. And one of the things I find challenging is, you know, often someone will say to me, you know, where do you want to be in 5 years? And I'll be like, well, I want to do a bit of teaching. I want to keep doing research, and, you know, maybe I'd like to try something a bit more, you know, partnered with industry. And someone says to me, oh, so you want a rounded academic portfolio. And I never really understand what that means. So I think sometimes it's difficult to find something to mark your own success against. And when you can't do that, I often sort of will spin around in my head going, but, you know, I feel like I'm doing okay, but I'm not 100% sure. So I've got a few little, without bashing academia too much, I think one of the things that we also have to understand is that we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves. And remember, academia is a tough career. You know, there's a reason that a lot of people don't do it. And, you know, a lot of people will say to me, like, I just couldn't deal with the uncertainty. You know, I think instability in academia is a big driver in this. I think the reason sometimes I struggle with the term imposter syndrome is, you know, I've been working in academia now, doing 3 years of a PhD and then 6 years as a postdoc. And, you know, all of those 6 years are cobbled together with short-term contracts, which means you're sort of constantly living on the edge, uncertain about your future. And I think it does take a toll, you know, not really knowing where you're going. And I think for a lot of imposter syndrome is that feeling that you need to overachieve, that, you know, you need to be 10 times more prepared than the next person. And I think if we were honest, then, like, sometimes actually, you know, sometimes we kind of do in comparison to a lot of other careers. You know, you need to be constantly thinking one step ahead. You know, I remember I'm currently on a 2-year fellowship, and at the moment I got that fellowship, I thought, oh, that's amazing. That's 2 years. I don't have to think about it. And, you know, one of the first things that people said to me was, you know, like, you know, you can't rest too hard because 2 years goes by really quickly. And it does. You know, that's just a fact that we're living in. And it doesn't make it, you know, it's not a wrong feeling to kind of respond appropriately to that kind of uncertainty. As I mentioned, you know, research, I think, has, you know, remarkably few clear indicators of success. I think often work on projects which take years to kind of come to fruition. You know, publications can take an awfully long time, you know, months, sometimes even years to get out. If you think about in terms of, like, your impact on a study, I mean, that could take decades. So I think we know inherently that what we do is worth doing, but if you're thinking about kind of your own personal well-being, your own personal development, I think, you know, it becomes really challenging to kind of feel that and see a tangible result. I think it also means in a lot of professions, the way you'd kind of grow in confidence is, I mean, so the kind of phrase in medicine often is like, see one, do one, teach one. You know, that I think there's an element of kind of, we don't really get to repeat things in academia, which is the, you know, the very nature of it. And often I remember feeling on one of my projects, I'd felt so overwhelmed, and like I wasn't getting it, and everything was a struggle. And then I think finally near the end, I finally felt confident in doing it. I remember talking to my mentor at the time, and she said, you know, that's the job. She was like, the minute you're confident in doing something, you're onto the next thing. And, you know, it's a difficult thing to feel like you've finally gotten to something, and then you've got to start over again on something brand new, which you've never done before. And I think COVID is definitely having an effect still on on academia. I think we're becoming I think we are becoming much more siloed as researchers. It's something that I've always struggled with post-COVID, is the kind of the huge work from home culture, particularly in my university and particularly in my field of data science. I find that very difficult to be physically as well as sort of intellectually isolated from other people's projects. And as Rebecca touched on, it can kind of take away that sort of opportunity to discuss things with each other and, you know, air your struggles with other people and hear what other people are doing. So I don't want to take up too much time because you know, I think this is a good topic to kind of have a discussion about. But I was thinking today about a few things that maybe I think kind of institutionally and sort of individually and institutionally we could do to kind of improve on why imposter syndrome is so prevalent in our institutions. I think Rebecca's absolutely right. I think the first thing you have to do is just recognize that it's extremely common, and you are in absolutely no way, you know, strange or feeling these things on your own. I think having sort of networks between researchers, whether those that you build yourself or whether, you know, we can create through things like this. I think, you know, like making sure you document your own achievements. You know, I think about this a lot in sort of academic versus kind of industrial CVs. You know, if you talk to someone in industry, like an industry CV is all about what skills you've personally developed and like what you personally would bring to a new team. Whereas I think in academia, it's all about, you know, how many papers have you published, how many conference abstracts do you have, and you know, it's more of a focus on a sort of body of research work than it is sort of you as a person and what you kind of bring to those things. But I do think institutionally, especially in sort of higher education, academic work, I think there's a lot we could do to sort of make people feel like they belong more, and kind of help guide people and understand what their own strengths are and help them feel more confident. I think universities could do, you know, a much better job at supporting staff who are on these short-term contracts, you know, providing more bridging from grant to grant. You know, I think our institutions really need to think of researchers as sort of a more valuable resource that needs to be nurtured. And I think that's often really missed out. I mean, I've lost count of the amount of emails I've gotten about contracts coming to an end or funding that isn't there that begin with sort of "dear colleague." You know, they're large institutions, but we should still like treat each other like people. You know, I think often we depend on one senior academic a lot of the time. You know, many cases we'll have team science environments, but often your personal development is down to maybe one senior PI who you've relied on. Maybe it's your you know, PhD supervisor or your line manager. I know I had the same line manager for about 5 years after my PhD. And, you know, I think someone there to help you develop your research is a fantastic resource. But I think sometimes we miss the kind of personal development of people and the sort of professional development of people. I think maybe sometimes if, you know, we had more development from our institutions about, you know, what are your skills? What do you enjoy doing? What do you not enjoy doing? What aspects of, you know, thinking about it as, you know, we think about academia as a very personal thing and you kind of wrap your entire life and your entire identity in this thing. But at the end of the day, it is your job. And, you know, it isn't the be all and end all of your, you know, all of your confidence and all of your happiness. And I think having a little bit more of a formalized recognition of the kind of skills we develop. You know, we're all project managers, we all manage finances, we all manage people, we all manage data. Like, you know, I think it kind of goes under the radar, the kind of skills you build up as an academic. And I think these things are often overlooked. So I think coming back to whether imposter syndrome is always the best use of the word, you know, I think if these skills are kind of overlooked and not really recognized, then it's kind of a natural reaction. to the kind of environments we work in. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on it. I hope you can take something away from it, and yeah, it's been fantastic to share it.
Thank you, Connor. You raised a good point there towards the end that I was kind of thinking about what are the take homes that everybody watching here can do, and even if it's not for yourself, it's for somebody else, which is around that idea of peer validation. I think, you know, telling somebody when they've done a good job. I think complimenting somebody on their piece of work, telling somebody when they've got a good job, you know, whether that's an email or going up to somebody afterwards or somebody who's helped you along the way, saying thank you, that was great, that was really good, I think can go a really long way towards helping offset that. And even if it's not going to benefit you, it's going to help them. So everybody who's watching, if you've seen a good talk lately, or you know, you should all email Connor straight afterwards, you know, to say thank you, Connor, you were amazing.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to feel like you're sort of like a tiny cog in a massive machine.
Absolutely. Well, that was another point you make. I thought about institutions. Rebecca, come back and join us, because I've got a question here on my, which I will find, which is, do you think academic institutions unintentionally make imposter syndrome even worse? And what could they do? And I was thinking about this, thinking every job application you see these days starts with, you know, we're looking for exceptional candidates, or we're looking for amazing people, or leaders, and things like that. Just those little words in a job advert can make you go, oh, yeah, that they're clearly looking for somebody more qualified than me. Now, they might be. But I don't know, taking words out like that. Are there other things you've come across with institutions where you think they've not helped this?
I would almost say that they sometimes, to the point I feel like it can almost be exploited. To the point, you know, I remember when I applied for promotion, so you could tick 3 boxes, and it has to be, to go from a research associate to a senior research associate, you had to be an exceptional performer in your research outputs, an exceptional performer in teaching, or an exceptional performer in both. And I remember being like, well, I think my research is good. I think it's better than it was. I think it's like...
Do you think this, because also, is this a British thing? You know, if you're watching this and you're watching in the US or something like that, do you think there's more self-confidence from the outset in people in different, depending on the culture you grew up in as well? Because the reason why I mention that is because one of my stats here says that 70% of people report experiencing imposter syndrome at some point in their career, particularly common in high-achieving, high-pressure environments. Women, people of colour, and first-generation academics report experiencing it more intensely and frequently. So first-generation students particularly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think for me, so I count myself as a half generation student because both my parents have been to university, but they both did it later in life. So I've seen both of my parents graduate. So neither of them went kind of the traditional route through uni. And the thing that I find the most strange about academia as a workplace is that you're constantly getting criticism, and that's the norm, right? It's not the norm to do a piece of work and for people to go, that's great, carry on. It is the norm to do a piece of work and have it come back covered in red ink, or have it come back, you know, with reviewer comments, which, you know, will sometimes have a, this is good, but all this stuff in it. And so that's the thing that I find particularly strange and difficult to not only tell kind of my self-worth in this kind of environment, but also of my ideas. Because what I have is kind of the bubble of my lab where I know everyone and it's a really friendly environment. And when I present these ideas, I get kind of constructive pushback and questions, but it feels much more friendly. And then the minute it gets outside the bubble, suddenly it seems like everything gets torn down. And so
under the auspices of academic rigor, that's what we need.
exactly that.
Peer review.
Yeah.
That's what.
And when
Yeah.
obviously I think from kind of talking to people who are in other jobs, you have performance reviews, but you get told what you do well as the stuff that you don't do well. So honestly, some of the only feedback I get on that it says, what I'm doing right is the reports that I get kind of termly from my supervisor is the only place where I read them and I go, oh, okay. Because I have just no frame of reference for what is a normal working week? What am I supposed to be doing? What comes next? How good am I doing? And when all you ever get is constructive criticism, it becomes really difficult to evaluate how good you are at your job because all you get is the criticism. So that's something that I really struggled with, I think. And I don't know if that's kind of heightened by the fact that I didn't know that environment going in. But it's certainly not helped.
No, and I mean, so there's another stat here, which is people reporting imposter syndrome are less likely to apply for grants, less likely to apply for jobs, less likely to apply for promotions, even when qualified. And I think that's where, as you've both touched upon, mentoring, supervisors, being kind of encouraged through that self-doubt, and where your peers can make all the difference to that, can't they?
Yeah.
Let's look through my questions here. Are there any small daily habits that have helped shift your mindset?
I'm a sucker for a to-do list. Because like I say, there's such a lack of concrete kind of things that prove that you've done something. I'm always a bit wary of kind of learned helplessness. And so for me, having a to-do list where I put on even the most basic stuff, like checking email, and then crossing it off as I go through the day, it just helps me feel like in a very nebulous working environment with no real structure, it helps me provide that structure, which has helped me. And the other thing that I've started doing recently is when people do say something positive, when I get like a nice email from a teacher from a school that I've been in or anything like this, I write it down somewhere. I copy it, I paste it into like a Word document or a spreadsheet. And so whenever I'm feeling like a little bit shaky, I go and read it and go, no, see, okay, I am actually good at what I do. And that's been really helpful. And also just sometimes I will explicitly ask people for a bit of validation. Like the people that I know really well, like my friends, my coworkers, my family. I have a habit of sometimes I'll go to people and say brain gremlin. And it's the representation that the thing I'm about to say has no bearing in reality. I'm aware of the fact that it's irrational. I don't need you to help me try and rationalize my way out of this. I just need you to say something to kind of placate it. And that's been really helpful for me of just getting like, can someone just tell me I'm doing a good job? Because sometimes it's like this psychological thing that I just need someone to say, you're doing fine.
I think we could, as I said at the start, I think we could get better that you shouldn't need to ask.
Yeah.
I think if we all just got a little bit better at saying, well done, good job to each other, it would go a long way. I'm the same because obviously, in my job at Dementia Researcher, we churn out, blogs and podcasts and these webinars and the community and things like that. And I think people just consume this content. And all too often, I'm not quite sure, is this actually helpful? Do people want this? Which then gets me, it's not a personal kind of imposter syndrome, but I do get this like professional thinking, is what we're doing, what people want? And occasionally I'll bump into somebody at conference, oh, I love the newsletter, it's amazing, I get it every Friday and it's really helpful. And you're going, oh, great, that's brilliant, because I'm never quite sure. I think, but you also don't want to be needy, do you? You don't want to say, oh, do you like what we do? Yeah. What about you, Conrad? Have you got some top tips, daily things you do?
So I was going to suggest do a to-do list, but someone offered me an alternative to a to-do list, which I now share with everyone. Everyone I've shared it with says it's a really good thing. So I maybe stopped doing a to-do list so much, but I do like a done list at the end of the day, which is kind of like, so I think I kind of merged it because I do a lot of I try and keep a research journal. I always say everyone should try and keep a research journal because it's really handy. But even if it's just 15-20 minutes or half an hour at the end of the day, just write down what I did today. was today a good day? What did I do today that kind of went well? What did I do today that really kind of went badly, and what I need to sort of think about? Like, I think when you try and I got in the habit of having just a constant to-do list, which was just getting ridiculous. And then I was kind of like, no, I'm just going to write down everything I've done, and then at the end of the week, you can actually see, oh yeah, I did do things. And some days it might just be you checked your email. But I always kind of think no, I've got something done. I can turn my computer off at the end of the day and not feel bad about, because I just sit there and go, oh my god, I've done nothing. And then you kind of go well, actually, that's not true. You did do stuff.
I know exactly what you mean, and whether that's me, I have the same thing, bit of OCD. I do kind of, for me, my Fridays are my to do that newsletter that goes out on a Friday. That's kind of my okay. Because that kind of reflects on everything I've done this week. I mean, it's not everything, because of course we're also arranging the things months in advance. But I'd like putting that out and going, okay, yeah, I did stuff this week, but there wasn't anything.
I want to say as well, I think it definitely resonates, because I'm the first person in my family to do a degree. I think it does take a toll sometimes when you don't really realize how little. So if I talk to if you talk to someone about how's someone says, oh, how's work going? And I think sometimes we kind of forget that this job and this career is really, really strange, and it's really unusual, and it works in a way that not many other workplaces do. And you'll face a lot of challenges that if I go and just sit with my parents and be like, oh yeah, this is happening at work, and someone's contract's coming to an end, or there's something going on in the research lab, blah blah blah, and just be like. They just look at us kind of I have no idea how to help you.
Well, you raised the point. Sorry, go on, Rebecca.
Sorry, I was just saying, I had this with even stuff like my PhD viva, of the idea that you submit your thesis, but you're not done. Then you have a viva, but you're not done. Then you have corrections, then you submit them, then you're kind of done until you graduate. And things like just getting pushback from papers, my family don't know what nature is.
And you might have finished your PhD even before then, because the minute you might have finished before you submit, because you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm I did all my data collection. They're so you're done, and I'm no, it's weird.
But so, should we avoid trying to pin our entire self-worth to productivity or academic output? Because you both mentioned to-do lists there as being the way that you validate that, but I don't know is that healthy.
Probably not.
Probably not. I think for me, someone once said to me, just don't put all your eggs in one basket. I think it's so much. You take things so much harder when all of your worth is based on that job or that project you've been doing. And so I think for me, I am someone that I like to put all of myself in my work. I like to have my to-do list, but it also means that at 5, 6 o'clock, I stop. I don't think about work. I play video games. I play Dungeons and Dragons. I just completely switch off. And I have that kind of hard set most days. And I think for me, it's not been so much making an effort not to pin too much self-worth on work, because I think that's difficult to do, but more making sure that I pin self-worth elsewhere as well. And my partner once told me, and I'm going to marry this man, but he just looked at me one day and just went, you do know you have value in a vacuum. And that just completely blew my mind. So I think recognizing that, one, I could do nothing at all and I still have inherent value, and trying to make sure that I place value on other parts of myself, on theatre, on completing the next level of video game, on all this kind of creative endeavours outside, rather than trying to reduce the amount of effort, of self-worth that I put into my academic work.
Because you do feel then that, because that's going to bleed through into professional life, that adding to that. I've got lots of notes here that talk about this not just being an issue of confidence, and that it's where's my note on this subject? No, wrong notes. Here we are. No, can't find them. About reframing self-doubt as growth. is one comment I've got written down here. And also as well, I've written down here about over preparation and perfectionism are often coping mechanisms, which over preparation particularly are coping mechanisms that we all deal with, fully scripting out everything you're going to say, fully writing down. I know I've even been at conferences, and before I'll ask questions, I'm like, I know if I just speak that out loud, I'm going to muddle it, so I'm going to write it down and then read my question, which only because I've done that. I've started kind of asking a question, gone, oh, I have no idea what I was about to say. And then, and when things do go wrong, that just adds to that, kind of reinforces your view that you are an imposter. How do you avoid that? How do you, when you tank that book or you send that paper in and it comes back, completely saying this is rubbish? How do you avoid that adding to self-confidence and to your feelings of imposter?
Oh, I find this really hard, especially sitting looking at a current PhD student, because I hate myself for saying it. But I think you just kind of it's one of those things that when you tell young people, younger people than you, you just come to learn that it doesn't matter. And so
I'm getting there.
Yeah, so I always talk to PhD students now, and I'm just like, whenever I talk to them, and you've just got to do it, because the first time something messes up is the first opportunity you go, you know what, this guy didn't fall in. So I always struggle with people who, I see some people sometimes who really have real fear and just be like, they will not give a presentation, and it's really hard, but you do just kind of have to just do it, realize nothing horrible happened, and then we all have a bit of a laugh about it. But I do think it's really hard to put yourself in that mindset. It is kind of the responsibility of do you have a supportive manager? Do you have a supportive people around you who can say whatever happens, no matter how badly you mess up, it doesn't matter. I think we can't expect people to just come to that conclusion on their own.
I completely agree. And I think on the over preparation thing, they say I have flubbed lines kind of on stage in front of a good number of people that I have never once gotten wrong in 2 months of rehearsals. So I think there is no amount that you can over prepare that will ever guarantee that you'll do perfectly. And I completely agree that this is what I'm writing the blog about at the minute, is that getting kind of comments back. For me, I get told don't take it personally. And I completely understand that advice, and it's good advice. But I think for me, there needs to be a step before that, which is take it personally. Let yourself acknowledge that this hurts. It's okay that it hurts. You're human. It's going to affect your self-confidence for a bit. Have a little bit of a rant, have a little bit of a cry, wallow for an hour with some chocolate if you need. Do whatever you need to do to kind of process that personally before you go on to that kind of more professional level of, now I can not take it personally. Let's look at it objectively. So I think for me, it's also been, that's kind of part of that, acknowledging the impact that not just imposter syndrome, but just things in academia can have, that will have on you personally, regardless of how much you try and detach your self-worth from it. And letting myself process that as a person before I try to tackle it as an academic is something that I found really helpful.
Absolutely. I completely agree. We're pretty much out of time. I've got my usual 10 top tips that we're going to end in. We did get a question earlier, which I'm just trying to find now, which was if anybody had any recommendations on books, I think it was. Hello, Lauren asked, hello, I work with medical students. I'm wondering if there are any books that you might recommend to read or would recommend on this topic. Anybody? Or YouTube videos you've seen? Anything you've seen that's helped to this? In my notes, I went and looked to see if UCL, the university I work at, offers support in this, and they do. They offer workshops specifically on imposter syndrome. There's also lots of great blogs and articles on being a first-generation student. We've got some on our website that Rebecca's written about. Beth Eyre wrote some about that as well previously. So we'll have a think about books, but in the meantime, do go check out the blogs on the Dementia Researcher website. Before I move on to our final 10 top tips, I'd just like to highlight that next Wednesday's weekly salon webinar is back to being at 12 noon. It's on Wednesday, the 28th of May, and we're going to be talking about writing a Leigh summary. And I've got a lovely guest host with us for that one. We're going to be joined by Andrew Cornwall, who is a volunteer with the Alzheimer's Society, who's going to guest host that. And our speakers are Rushal Chanda and Nadine Mirza, who are going to come and join us. There are also some opportunities at the moment for you to take a turn at hosting the salon. So if you've got issues with confidence, one great way to try and overcome that is to host a salon session with one of the most friendliest guests and some of the most amazing audience members who will never judge and will only. So if you'd like to have that opportunity to host a webinar in the salon, do let us know. There's a couple of sessions left. We're looking for somebody to host on the 9th of July on navigating academic promotions, and on the 30th of July, the practicalities of overseas lab visits. So if any of those topics interest you, you don't have to be an expert on the topic, because of course you'll be hosting. We'll have experts talking to them. But if you'd like a crack at hosting those, because it's a topic that interests you, do drop me a line, because Connor and I are going to be away at the AIC in the end of July, and we'll be making some podcasts. So if you're at the AIC, do come and say hello. And at the beginning of July, we've got the Alzheimer's Society's Early Career Researcher Retreat in Northampton, which also clashes with some of those. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. But here we are. Finish off now. Brilliant. Thank you very much to the incredible Rebecca and the awesome Connor for your brilliant talks and insights. I can honestly say that neither of you should feel like imposters, because you both do brilliant work. And I can honestly say that. So as all of you know, we finish these salon webinars off by asking the AI that's been specifically trained on all the transcripts and blogs from our website, nothing else. It doesn't have access to the internet. It's just been given every piece of content from the nearly 3,000 pages of content on the Dementia Researcher website. That's blogs, webinars, podcasts, articles, the job descriptions, everything we've got on our websites. It trained this large language model, and I asked it to provide 10 top tips for tackling imposter syndrome. This is what it came up with. Let's see if Connor and Rebecca came up with the same answers. Number one.
This is brilliant.
Number one, talk about it. It thrives in silence. Share your feelings with trusted peers. Rebecca even said she does that. Number two, track your wins. Keep a done list or a success journal to revisit when doubt creeps in. Ta-da! Number three, reframe your inner voice. Challenge the critic. What would you say? Would you say that to a friend? Number four, prepare but don't over prepare. Know when good enough is really good enough. There you go. Number five, say yes to things that scare you. Growth feels uncomfortable. That doesn't mean it's wrong. And I think you have nailed all of these so far. Number six, seek feedback, real, not imagined. Don't assume the worst if no one praises you. Oh. Number seven, unpack the culture. Recognize when your doubt is about environment and not about you. Number eight, visualize the room differently. You earned your seat. Imagine it with your name on it. I'm not sure.
Okay.
That's a new one. We didn't talk about having our names on seats. And number nine, find your people. Join communities where you feel supported and not compared. There you go. That's what this community is all about. Why we've got a celebrating wins section, why we've got career sections and places where you can come and present and talk about your work. And finally, number 10, celebrate others and yourself. If you see someone else's worth, the chances are they see yours too. Tell them. Ta-da! Well done, both of you. Everything you said this evening completely agrees with all the content we already had on our website, so this was a waste of time.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who was interpreting it that way.
No, those 10 things are 10 final takeaways. So if you learned nothing or you haven't had time and you've skipped through to the end, hopefully those 10 things are good reminders to summarize what we've talked about today. Thank you very much to the brilliant Rebecca Williams and the incredible Connor Richardson. You've been great guests. I hope to see you again in the salon. And thank you very much for all of you for sticking with us this evening. And do catch us again next Wednesday in the Dementia Researcher Salon. I'm Adam Smith, and you've been watching in Dementia Research Communities app. Bye.
Bye. Oh, he's gone.
Oh, he's gone. He's gone. He's completely gone. Should we go? I feel like we should maybe go. It's not recording anymore. Stream ending in 1 second.